Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Kerbal Space Program and the Interplanetary Chase. You join us here in the R&D tree, where following some of the previous episodes where of course we've managed to get a motherload of science from the Kerbal Orbital Lab, it's about time we have a look at spending some of our science points. And of course, first thing we're going to do is get some improved command pods, because the ones we currently have are a little bit basic and they don't really fit much crew with particularly easy attachment points. Now, we're having a look. I'm possibly thinking advanced landing for some improved landing legs, bigger heat shields, and I think we will absolutely be taking that, taking us down to 390-ish. Having a look at advanced metalworks for some of the, obviously, the docking ports that are kind of in line with a nose, but I think we may need some bigger fairings down the line, and as it stands, I think we can afford that, although we are just having a look at some of the electrics to see if we can get anything more from there, but ultimately the composites does provide the 3.75 metre fairing, which will be quite important later on, so I think we are going to get that. Now that takes us down to 94 science. Can't really afford anything now. Speaking of now, of course, we're going to go straight into a vehicle assembly building here with one of our brand new command pods, and we are starting a little bit of a secret project that some of you guys may or may not know about. Now, what I'm doing here is I am building what can only be described as a descent and ascent vehicle, almost like a lander. However, it's all in, I suppose, kind of one part. Now, because we've got the bigger command pods, that also means we need a lot more science, of course. So we're using the bigger service bay here and adding a bit more. Well, we have lots of space, of course. So firstly, we're adding a reaction wheel followed by some electrics because, of course, we need those to kind of, live in space. I'm thinking of adding some solar panels here as well. As you can see, the retractable ones, so we can open the service bay and extend the solar panels. Now, we're also going to think about science, of course. So we might be able to fit a Science Junior in here. Of course, we need to put an antenna here just to ensure that we retain connection to the Kerbal Space Centre. And here we go. Science Junior fits nice and snug. It is clipping a little bit, so I'm just going to move the reaction wheel upwards a little bit and move everything attached to that down just to make sure they remain in the same place. Wonderful. And of course, we're going to put Science Return Unit just to improve our capacity for data, followed by some struts on the docking port to make sure that there's a nice sturdy connection between that and the cupola there. So far so good, just making sure auto strut is on for everything, and it is looking rather nice so far. So decoupler below the heat shields, followed by fuel tank, and then of course we're going to be putting our engine plates, and I believe we will use a proven setup of 2 Bobcats, of course in their compact variety. Move those closer together and up a little bit. And we have the skeleton, I suppose you could call it, of a lander. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put 2 of the FL800 fuel tanks here, followed by some RCS tanks, as we don't have much monopropellant. We only have that provided by the command pods, which isn't much, followed by some parachutes on those and some heat shields on the bottom. And I'm hoping those Bobcats will draw from the side fuel tanks as well to improve their overall ISP and give us a little bit more delta V, of course. Now, in terms of science, we have some 2 hot thermometers, we have some mystery goo, although I'm not too sure if that will fit particularly well because, of course, it's all looking a tiny little bit off-centre. So ultimately, we decided to go mirror mode and put them around the back of the Science Junior. And then we're going to put some atmospheric scanners towards the top where there's a little bit more room, auto strut, and that looks absolutely wonderful. Of course, close the service bay, and it's only now I notice that the fuel tanks need to be rotated to either sides because, of course, we need to put some ladders if we're going to be landing somewhere, don't we? And those fuel tanks were a tiny little bit in the way, so we've got our ladders there. Absolutely wonderful. And of course, what's a lander without landing legs, right? So we'll go ahead and put some of those on as well. Make sure they're all nice and auto-strutted. Wonderful stuff. Sits on the ground nice and snug. And Just strutting the side tanks into place as well. And of course, I seem to have forgotten about the fact that engine plates are decouplers, but I think we've already changed it so that shouldn't stage. As we save this. And of course, we need to make sure it has probe control as well, as I don't intend on setting this up with a Kerbal on board just yet. So we'll have a look at putting a drone core. Once again, just restrutting the docking port. And that probe core should be nice and snug. RCS, obviously in case we need to dock anywhere, which, spoiler alert, we will. Followed by a bit of a passive solar panel on the cupola there, just to ensure that we remain powered. I'm aware that, of course, we do have the extendable ones on board, but just in case we forget about those, of course, we do have that one. And also a drone chute. Just to slow us down enough on atmospheric re-entry should we need to do that, of course, given we've got some really powerful rocket engines there. No Kerbals on board. Of course, we're just going to rename this. Wonderful. Now, next thing we need to do is build a launcher to get this to where it needs to be. And of course, we do have the bigger fairings. However, we do not have, of course, the fuel tanks for the big enough full set fairing. So we need to look into getting that when we next get some more science in. So as it stands, I'm starting to have second thoughts about our way of launching this. Inverted is not the way to go, as it would turn out. As we build what can only be described as an egg for a fairing. And I'm not a particularly big fan of this, so ultimately we just throw caution to the winds and decide to launch this thing the old-fashioned way, being fairingless and make a somewhat similarly shaped rocket underneath it to make sure that it's structurally sound. So, of course, little decoupler here. That one was actually too big, and we need to move that down so it doesn't clip into the engine bells, followed by a fairing. Clip that up and attach it to the bottom of the boat tail of our engine plate, and that looks absolutely wonderful. Now we can, of course, think about putting some fuel tanks on. Followed by another fuel tank just to make sure we have enough Delta V, of course. Engine plate. And we are once again going to use our twin Bobcat engines here. That seems to be our kind of most reliable engine setup thus far. Followed by some side decouplers, and we're going to use our kickback rockets now because the thumpers are a little bit too small. And as you can see, the kickbacks are almost clipping into the heat shield there. The parachutes are, but that's not overly concerning, I would say. And of course, some fins to ensure aerodynamic stability during our ascent, followed by some separatrons on the kickbacks to pull them away from the rocket. We're going to move those down a little bit because we don't want them burning through the fairing, which we've seen happen in the past. Oh, not the fairing, so yes, it is a fairing, isn't it? Of course it is. And some launch towers to hold us up above the launch pads. And just rejigging our staging because, of course, we changed the root parts to the probe core, which as a result has completely messed up our current staging. So just bear with me while we correct that. So far, so good. And move that down, save, and launch. Now, of course, we are sending this this vehicle to the Kerbal Orbital Lab, which we've recently vacated, haven't we? Because our Kerbals are back home having a bit of a rest before their next mission, let's say. And I'm sure some of you guys may be getting the hint now, because of course, why would we be sending landers and these types of vehicles to the lab? All will be told in due time. Speaking of time, of course, we're 30 seconds into our mission, just breaking through 3 kilometres. Our kickbacks are almost 2/3 of the way into their burn time. And I think this is a pretty nice ascent. So far, so good. It's stable, which is interesting given the interesting design of this rocket. As we detach those kickbacks, good separation, and the parachutes deploy. Lovely. 15 kilometres, 16 now. Of course, this footage is time accelerated because we've been to orbit many times before. It's just a simple docking. It's not really that much interesting to say, really, other than once again this design of a rocket. I'm surprised it's as stable as it is. It might be down to the fact that we used those interesting canard-style tail fins rather than our rocket fins, which of course are designed to keep the tail of an aircraft where it needs to be. So if you've got 4 of them, you're going to have quite a lot of control authority. Well, here's hoping. Our apoapsis is just about to break out of Kerbin's atmosphere, which means if we continue to coast now, we will be in space. But of course, we need to continue pushing our apoapsis up to 100 kilometers. Reason being is because that's where the Kerbin Orbital Lab is currently orbiting. We've timed this launch to hopefully get an intercept, as you can see. It will be a little bit in front of us by the time we reach our apoapsis, but that's nothing we can't fix by the time we've circularized. Opening our service bays, of course, and extending our solar panels, and it's a good thing we didn't forget to do that. And I imagine they will stay like that for the foreseeable. Now we're just getting a little bit closer to our apoapsis here before we continue burning. And here we go. Of course, relative to our target, it is going 1 kilometre per second quicker than us. And we separated the, of course, the vehicle now, which is finishing the circularization. Maybe if we launched a little bit earlier even, we may have been in a little bit of a better position, so we'll have to keep that in mind, because of course, if any of you remember the layout of the docking ports on the station, you'll know that it's symmetric. There's not really any room for one particular vehicle other than the junior docking port, but as you know, we've got the normal sized one on this particular vehicle, so we will in fact be sending up a second one once we've managed to get this one docked. And we're just doing some funky little manoeuvres here. I'm perfectly aware that this isn't the most efficient way to get an intercept, but it's what I've done, and of course I haven't had any problems so far. Speaking of problems, we are of course getting into the dark side of Kerbin, so that might make things a little bit harder. However, we do have some lights on the station, and assuming we can spot the docking port we need, we will be able to set that as a target and control our own vehicle from its docking port, and use the nav ball to assist with our manoeuvres. And as you can see, there's the station. We're just matching velocities. Wonderful. So we'll enter our docking mode here and see if we can kill our translation using our RCS thrusters, although I think we still might be going a little bit quick. As you can see, I didn't quite clock that until we got this close, so we'll just use our rocket engine just to finish that before we start to manoeuvre ourselves into position. There we go. So set the docking port as a target, control our own vehicle from the docking port. Back to docking mode we go. And we need to eke ourselves in a little bit closer before we can of course rotate the vehicle relative to the docking port. I must say, the docking mode I think is a severely underrated feature. It makes docking so much easier. I've only started using it recently and wow, it is an absolute game changer. I've been playing this game since version 0.19 and I'm still discovering things about this game. I mean, it probably didn't help that I was more of a kind of a space plane builder than I was a rocketry master. I mean, I'm not claiming to be any good at this game by any means, I'm just, you know, it's amazing, all the possibilities. But of course, we are getting a bit sidetracked, so I must apologise. We are 15 kilometres away from the docking port, and of course from now we just need to set our prograde marker to align with the target. And we are coming in a little bit hot, so we're just going to slow down a little bit, bonk the docking port, switch off our RCS and SAS, and let the magnets do the work. And that is one vehicle successfully docked to the station. And of course, so far so good. Just balancing the fuel load, just to ensure that everything is okay. However, this will be a little bit pointless, as you'll see later on. But for now, of course, it is the best thing to do. Owing to our little refuelling vessel that we previously docked, we do have the resource to move across as we shut off the engines. And we will shortly be going back to the Space Centre to launch our second vehicle. Now, of course, we are launching this one a little bit earlier, as we learned from our previous attempt to intercept. We did still manage to dock, but it was not the most efficient by any means. Breaking through 1 kilometre now. Once again, I'm amazed at how stable this thing is. It might be to do with the fact that, of course, when we get rid of the solid rocket boosters, all the mass kind of shifts to the front. By that point, we're kind of already in the middle of our gravity turn, which might help keep a nose pointed where it needs to be, rather than to keep a tail behind us, so to speak. But enough jibber jabber. Passing 10 kilometres now, SRBs are about to run out of fuel, and away they go. Science Alert is telling me that we can do an atmosphere scan. However, we can't do that without opening the service bay, which I'm not willing to do just yet because, of course, we have more important things to do. Almost reaching our 30 kilometre mark. From the front, this thing looks like a shuttle, and it's really cool. That is until you move the camera and see that it is in fact a really, really long, very interesting looking rocket. As we shift over to manoeuvre mode here and spot the station, we should probably consider pointing prograde to increase our orbital speeds. And I'm aware our apoapsis is still within the atmosphere. However, the more speed we gain, the further that will be pushed out, albeit very slowly, but that's fine. As long as we match velocities with the station, it should be fairly straightforward. Apoapsis is obviously 85 kilometres now, so it's already out of Kerbin's atmosphere. 95. And a couple. Apoapsis is now at 100 kilometres, so that's matched that of the station, which is good. However, you may see our periapsis is still within the atmosphere, so we haven't yet circularised. So, of course, we will need to do that before we make any more rendezvous attempts, because, of course, the last thing we want is to all of a sudden find ourselves falling back into the atmosphere. By doing this, we are pushing our apoapsis out a bit. However, as you can see, we have essentially managed to circularise with the station only 20 kilometres away. So we're going to fire our engines towards the station ever so slightly and, of course, coast up to it. And by the time we are rendezvoused with the station, we will circularise and more or less be in the same orbit as the station, because, of course, we've matched altitudes, we've matched velocities, and therefore we've matched trajectories. So we kill our relative speeds here. And I must say, I'm very pleased with that rendezvous. I don't think I've ever been quite so good with launching times. As we set the docking port as a target, we're aligning our antenna with, of course, the other lander. As we toggle our manoeuvre mode, or docking modes as it should be, using our RCS to once again attempt to position ourselves over this particular docking port. You can see the little prograde marker is appearing on our navball now, so we're on the right track. And of course, from now we simply need to translate forwards, and we will find ourselves eventually docked with targets here. translate just a little bit more because I think we're not quite correct. We may need to rotate our vehicle a bit more. However, I think that's nothing that the magnets on the docking ports shouldn't be able to account for. As we're coming in a bit hot, so we'll just stop ourselves a little bit. Hit the docking port once again, switch off our stability, and that is our second lander docked. Wonderful. As we're just renaming our station once again because for some reason it seemed to adopt the name of one of the landers, which was an interesting little thing. Now it's about time we start attempting to balance our fuel. Not an easy task by any means. However, we're going to do what we can because, of course, we want the landers to be fully fueled. We did get through some of the landers' fuels by, of course, intercepting our station. So we'll need to consider that for when we next build one of those. It might be worth adding an extra stage to possibly help with our orbital manoeuvres there. Thankfully, there is a lot of fuel in this refuel vessel that we've previously docked, so we're not running out of resource anytime soon. I just wish it was a bit simpler in terms of the refueling system because I'm not particularly familiar with it, so I'm having to do it one fuel tank at a time, and you will see later in this episode that I make a bit of a boo-boo. However, at the same time, it was a learning experience and I did proceed to understand how you're supposed to do it, so to speak. As we are almost done in terms of our balancing. And we proceed to point prograde. Wonderful. So, that is actually the first half of what we intended to do done. On that note, we are coming up to the end of this episode. So, if you did enjoy today's episode, please do like and subscribe for more Kerbal Space Program and related content. And I will catch you guys in part 2. See you later.